Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, March 25th, 5:15 PM at Wausau City Hall, and with a quorum of members present, I will be calling the Finance Committee to order. We will have one agenda item that will require a joint Finance and Economic Development Committee, so we will take that item at the end here. I think these finance items will go relatively quick. Item number one is minutes of the previous meeting. That's from February 25th, 2025. Do I have a motion? Motion from Gisselman, second. From Hinkie. Any discussion? Not hearing anything. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And that carries. Item number two. Bear with me while I read this whole thing. Discussion and possible action approving accepted offers for the following parcels of project ID 6999-00-16 West Wausau Avenue, Stevens Drive to North 10th Avenue, Parcel 2, 1313 to 1315 West Wausau Ave, temporary limited easement, Parcel 3, 1301 to 1303 West Wausau Avenue, and 1307 to 1309 West Wausau Avenue, temporary limited easement, Parcel 4, 1219 to 1221 West Wausau Avenue, temporary limited easement, Parcel 6, 1213 to 1215 West Wausau Avenue, temporary limited easement. Parcel 7, 1207 to 1209 West Wausau Avenue, temporary limited easement. Parcel 8, 1201 to 1203 West Wausau Avenue, temporary limited easement. Parcel 9, 1130 West Bridge Street, temporary limited easement. Parcel 11, 1102 West Wausau Avenue, temporary limited easement. Parcel 12, 828 North 10th Avenue, temporary limited easement. And these are all related to the West Wausau Avenue construction project that'll be happening in the vicinity of Wausau West High School. So, any discussion? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to accept these offers. A motion from Gisselman, second.
I'll second.
Second from Hinkie. Any further discussion? Not hearing anything. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that carries. Okay, item number 3. Discussion and possible action approving offering price report and accepted offer for the following parcel of project ID 6999-00-16 West Wausau Avenue, Stevens Drive to North 10th Avenue. That's parcel 1, 1200 West Wausau Avenue, temporary limited easement. And this is the this particular parcel has to do with the high school, and so we're taking it separate from the rest of the parcels. Any discussion? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve.
Motion from Hinkie, second. Second from Gisselman. Any discussion? All right, not hearing anything. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that's approved. Thank you. Item number 4, a discussion and possible action on modifications to revenue policy. And I'll turn this over to you, Mary Ann.
Sure, it's just a small change in the policy that would allow us to, for our governmental funds, which includes like the general fund and all of our grant funds, they are on the modified accrual, which generally we only look to the first 6 months of the next, or the first 6 months, the first 60 days of the next year that revenue can come in, and we can classify it as revenue from the prior year because you're really looking at a more current resource basis. But with grants, we're allowed by GASB to adopt a 90-day policy, and so this change would allow us to do that because we do often see, you know, when you look at a department that's working on their grants on a reimbursement basis, they can incur expense at the end of December. The supplier doesn't get them the invoice, let's say, until sometime towards the end of January. Then it has to go through payment, and then they have to file their claim form. So it can take a while, and it can take a while for the grantor to actually provide us with the reimbursement. So this gives us an extra 30 days when we're working with grants to be able to show that as a revenue of the previous year.
Okay. Any discussion on that item? And I see in the procurement policy, yeah, that entire grant revenue section was struck out, and then it's replaced with revenue recognition.
Yes.
Okay. Alder Henke?
Yeah, I see this hasn't been updated since 2013, so probably good to go through it once.
It
anyway,
was,
so, yeah.
and we adopted a separate grant policy altogether. So, which is really about managing grants, not so much the revenue recognition component of it. So, yeah, it was great to be able to clean that up too.
So I'll move
for pointing
to,
that-
I'll move to approve.
Okay, a motion from Henke to approve the modifications to the revenue policy. There's our second. Second from Gisselman. Any discussion? Not hearing anything. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that carries. All right. Item number 5. And 5 and 6 are kind of related, so we'll start with 5, though. Discussion and possible action on approving delegation of authority to the Board of Public Works for settlement of civil, criminal, governmental, regulatory, administrative, or arbitration proceeding in an amount not to exceed $75,000. And I don't know, do we? Okay, Ann Jacobson, city attorney's here. I don't know if you want to give us fill us in a little bit on this.
Sure, just looking over all the various delegations of authority for settlement, if the council so chooses to do that, you have had in the past done a resolution to authorize settlement authority to the HR director to up to $5,000, I think, for settlement of workers' compensation claims. By ordinance, the council delegated a long time ago the authority to first the Claims Committee and then the Board of Public Works to settle and defend what we call 89380 claims for damages to persons or property that are filed through our office and then brought to the Board of Public Works and looked at in closed session, which leaves a little bit of another category that's not covered by those two types of claims, and those are ones that may come out of administrative bodies, such as the EEOC or ERD, just to name a few. So, or just to name one, actually, but there would be others. So we're asking for, or recommending $75,000 as a reasonable amount to settle those claims. The last one we had was in 2018, so they don't happen very often. The last administrative settlement that we had. So we're just seeking, if you think it's appropriate, to recommend to council that Board of Public Works then gets that authority to settle the remainder of those types of claims up to $75,000. If there's any non-monetary relief that becomes part of a settlement in any of these proceedings, that would be brought back to council. This is just for monetary relief settlement purposes.
Okay, any questions or discussion on that item? Otherwise, not hearing anything, I will entertain a motion too, if you don't have any discussion. A motion from Gisselman. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second from Henke. Discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that carries. And then,
Thank you.
and then item number 6, discussion and possible action on amending Wausau Municipal Code Section 3.16.050, empowerment. Yeah, and that one has, that one's related to this other item, is that correct?
Yes, well, that's the other empowerment ordinance that I was pointing out. But if you look at the old paragraphs A and B, they were virtually identical. One mentioned the Claims Committee, the one we crossed out, and B mentioned the Board of Public Works. And so I think when that was changed, perhaps, from the Claims Committee, the Board of Public Works, somebody went in and amended that and didn't delete the other one. So it's kind of a cleanup. It's nothing changed substantively. So I just took the word deny out of the paragraph A that we eliminated and added it, as you can see in the yellow highlighted portion, in the new paragraph A and B.
All right,
So we're changing nothing substantively there.
so this is primarily housekeeping.
Yes.
Clean up our ordinance.
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion on that?
Move to approve.
Motion from Henke, a second. Second from Gisselman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that carries.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. And then we're at that point where we'll let the Economic Development Committee assemble, and we'll call a joint session. And Alder Lukens, when you're ready, you can call your body to order.
Okay, thank you. So I will call the Economic Development Committee to order with a quorum present.
Okay. And then we do have one item for the joint committee, discussion and possible action on purchase and development agreement with 700 Grand Apartments LLC for a 50-unit affordable multifamily housing project at 700, 804, 806, 810, 814, and 816 Grand Avenue.
I'll just start with a brief introduction on everything. This is a project that the city's been working on for over 2 years now in cooperation with Commonwealth Development, now known as 700 Grand Apartments LLC. This is for 70 below-market unit apartments at the corner of 700 Grand, corner of Thomas and Grand. The completion date per the LIHTC credits as well as our agreement is December 31 of 2026. Looking at a minimum construction spend of 11.5 million. City gap in terms of the funding contribution, which would come from our Affordable Housing Extension Fund, is 1.84 million. Just some other things on this, the environmental, we also have a contingency in there that they're working with WEDC on a brownfield grant. If for whatever reason the cost for environmental cleanup would exceed that, we have a contingency in there that would allow for another $60,000 from the city's Affordable Housing Extension Fund for that. Probably the biggest takeaway that I have is we've talked about affordable housing a lot. We've talked about finding ways to get more housing units in the market. This is an opportunity for 50 units at a cost of $38,000 per unit for the city to see more units out there. We have Tyler from Commonwealth in the crowd today. We also have Keith Dahl from Ellers available via WebEx if you have any questions.
All right. Any questions, discussion from the HR committee? Or not HR, from the finance committee? Yeah. Alder Killian.
I will have some questions, but maybe after they speak. If they're going to, are they going to be presenting or anything?
I think they're just, it sounds like they're just here to answer your questions.
Oh, okay. The question I would have is I understand that Commonwealth has had the opportunity to do their due diligence on this. I noted on the DNR map that there are 3 sites for potential underground storage tanks, USTs. Have you done your research on that so you're comfortable and that there won't be any liability for the city?
Yeah, permission to approach here, yeah. Yeah, so I can confirm that we've done extensive amount of due diligence here. So all work on site started with a phase 1 report, which is standard practice in our business. At that time, there were RECs identified, which are the recognized environmental contaminations. And so once RECs are identified in a phase 1, we transition to a phase 2. From there, it's just an additional site investigation work that we're doing. From the findings of the phase 2, we then have the information needed in tandem with our third-party environmental engineer to prepare what is called a site investigation work plan, SIWP. That as well is submitted to the DNR for approval. That has since been approved, and now we are in the process of WDNR approving the last report, which is the SIR, which is the site investigation report. Once those last 2 reports are approved, then we now have a plan, of course, in motion with the DNR that they have approved. Other than that, I can say throughout all 4 of these reports, our consultants have been on site an extensive amount. Their drillings now exceed about 30 different test pits, and throughout all those test pits, none of the drillings have presented any contaminants of VOCs.
And what about the USTs? Are you comfortable that they're not there?
That is our understanding that they're not. However, if we do identify them, then obviously there's a plan in place to address them, which entails having the environmental consultant on site, documenting everything that's happening, and then that goes to DATCAT for sign-off.
And then the developer will be responsible for cleanup of those if they're leaking?
That would be correct, with the caveat of the $60,000 Randy mentioned.
Okay, I guess the one other issue is the development agreement, and this is an unlikely scenario, I'm sure, that the developer would default, that there are provisions that the property could be returned back to the city by way of a deed, and the purchase price would be returned to the developer. In your opinion, based on what you've learned about the development agreement, would there be any ramifications for the city upon return to the city if all of the environmental issues hadn't been resolved? Are you aware of what that scenario would look like?
So in the event the developer faults and the environmental contamination has not been remediated, that's your question?
That's my question.
I think under the way the agreement is structured, I mean, in the event the developer faults, then the property is returned as is to the city.
So any unresolved environmental issues would then, in your opinion, be the responsibility of the city?
Yes, I think the land would be conveyed back as it was originally conveyed to Commonwealth.
Thank you.
I think those are some good points that Alder Killian brings up. I think it's important as part of their testing. I had some conversations. Well, Andy had a conversation today with Kevin Fable, our environmental engineer, and I reached out to Matt with Fergram, who's the consultant on the project, been doing most of the work. Based on their analysis and working through the SIWP and doing all the testing and getting results back, there's nothing to suggest from their results that if there is a UST in the ground that it is leaking. They haven't found any VOCs or petroleum, or at least any traceable amounts of that. So when I look at the risks, there's always risks when we do this. We're never going to protect ourselves 100%. But given the information we have, I feel confident that if there is an underground storage tank out there, that we'll be able to deal with it. That's part of why the WDC Brownfield grant was applied for. It's why we have some additional money in there for them. And given the fact that if we were to choose to do nothing with this project, if there are environmental, we know there's issues with some of the soil out there, that's going to continue to stay the way it is. This project gives us an opportunity to clean up that site and make it into usable housing units.
Okay, I appreciate the information, and I just wanted to bring up that in case the city might need a little bit more protection in the agreement. Thank you.
Okay. Alder Lukens, did you have anything else, or?
Any other questions from the Economic Development Committee? Otherwise, I just wanted to bring up that I appreciate the addition of, if I can get there, hold on one second, pages 28 and 29, I believe. Yes, I noticed as I was reviewing this, the addition of the list of unit types, the number of units, the rents, and then that was on 28, and on 29, I really appreciated the listing of example salaries of, different residents that might be interested in renting there, and the rents and the annual salary ranges. I think that was really helpful to add. And then just noted again that if utilities, that HUD sets the rent limit, so at $1,000 per month. And, so utilities would come off of that, so the rent is adjusted based on that, correct? So just wanted to note that I appreciated that information.
Yeah, Tyler, if you want to expand on that, that's a little bit interesting. I think that would be good for people to understand is you're serving anywhere from 30% to 80% of AMI. That's actually a pretty wide range of salaries, from people getting rents as low as the $400 or $500 range up into the $1,500, $1,600 range. And that's all based on the average median income for our area. HUD sets those limits. If you could speak just a little bit about that. You've got a lot of experience with LIHTC projects and
Yeah, absolutely. So, Randy, to your point, the entire goal of this development from its initial inception was to cast a very wide net across the community and try to present housing options for varying household sizes and incomes. We're looking at, ranging as low as $17,000 a year up to $82,000 a year. It's a very wide net, and what we're trying to do there is ultimately ensure that if someone walks up to our door and is looking for a place to live, we have an option for them at an affordable rate. But to just expand upon the HUD populated rent and then how the utility allowance comes into play. So to Randy's point, HUD surveys every county across the entire country and takes into account what an average 4-person household income will make. So we get that HUD rent limit at the federal level. But then as it relates to local utility costs, obviously those vary dependent upon the area of the country you're working in. Obviously, take an example of up north compared to down south and what you're going to pay for gas and electric. So we want to make sure that the utility rates we're using are local and accurate. And so in that model, or in this model, I should say, we defer to the local housing authority, which typically updates their utility allowance every year, which is compiled on real-time data of what folks are paying. So we then net that amount out of the HUD limit. And so, again, just striving along the theme of having an affordable housing unit for someone to live in.
Okay. Any other questions from the Finance Committee? Alder Gisselman?
A couple questions. With regard to the funding, can you, just for the viewing citizens, can you describe a little bit about the funding source for this, please?
Mary Ann, do you want to take that with Affordable Housing Fund? We can talk, we'll start with, Mary Ann can explain the Affordable Housing Fund, Housing Extension Fund, where that money came from, and then we can talk to Keith. Keith can talk a little bit about how the deal is structured in terms of when payments are made. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Yep, so the Common Council authorized carrying over, or keeping tax increment District 6, open one extra year. The increment from that is being used to fund affordable housing, which this project is the benefactor of some of that funding.
Thank you.
So that's the funding source. I'll let Keith, do you want to talk a little bit about your work on your financial gap analysis and then how the deal's structured?
Yeah, thanks, Randy. Good evening, everyone. So Elders, as the city's financial consultant, reviewed the developer's sources and uses and operating pro forma. We want to essentially review all of their financial assumptions and numbers to make sure that they comply with what we're seeing across the industry as general industry standards. We ultimately want to maximize all private resources before we start talking about filling a gap with public resources. Originally, the developer asked for about $2 million of funding from the city. specifically this Affordable Housing Extension Fund. But ultimately, through the analysis process that we went through, we determined that they would need about $1,840,000 to make that possible. Now, there is that environmental carve-out that if they do experience environmental costs over and above the grant that they receive from WEDC, that the city would help fill at least a portion of those costs up to a maximum amount of $60,000. As far as the disbursement of the grant, we're looking at 2 installments throughout construction and ultimately stabilization with lease up of this project. At, I believe it's time of certificate of occupancy being issued, the city would provide 90% of those funds with a 10% retainage until the look back can be completed and all costs can be verified 60 days before the project receives its permanent financing mortgage from WEDA. At that time, if there's no look back necessary, the city will release the remaining 10% of those grant proceeds. But if costs come in under what they're anticipating, that's where we may see a reduction in the amount of assistance needed from the city.
Thank you, Keith. Do you have any further questions, Holder?
Well, I just want, with regard to the design, I know that the Plan Commission was not unanimous in that. I don't, but with regard to the right in and right out on Grand Avenue, I mean, if you're wanting to go downtown from that entrance on Grand Avenue, you have to go quite a ways down Grand Avenue to your right to turn around and get back. As the same way with entering, coming from the south, I mean, it's not going to be an easy turn there. Why did you? I don't know if this is an appropriate place, but with the congestion with regard to Grand Avenue and that intersection, it seems to me that this is just another. I don't want to use the word, well, I'll use the word burden with regard to that exit out of the parking garage onto Grand Avenue. Any comments?
Can I come back up?
Of course,
Yeah,
of
okay.
course.
So, traffic throughout this entire entitlement process has been the main focus, and there is no doubt about that. Traffic as it pertains to the long-term or the longevity of the property and the design specifically, I'm happy to attest to that. So starting with the right-in, right-out concept that we implemented, to your point, it's not the most practical solution for our tenants. That said, we believe for the surrounding community as a whole, it's the better option to reroute traffic for 50 apartment units versus the vehicles that were counted on Grand Avenue and Thomas. I believe Grand was noted at about 23,000 travelers a day, and Thomas was approximately 14,000. So obviously a lot larger population there than the one slated to reside here at 700 Grand. And so with that, we thought that that was the best solution to overcome a road that already features a fair amount of traffic and to try to limit cross traffic turning to avoid any accidents occurring there on site.
So you took evidence of it. So this is the best solution that,
Well, that, and then in conjunction with the fact that we have split the parking significantly. So under the initial proposal, everything was kind of centered onto one side of the development. And so we've now split that in the balance of moving 30 stalls onto the side of Thomas. So, we believe through that, it will also kind of reduce the burden of having kind of a bottleneck experience coming in and out of the development site.
thank you.
Yep.
Alderman McElhaney?
I have a question about the makeup of the units. 23 are basically market rate. Why so many in that income bracket instead of the 30 or 50%?
Yep, so really good question. So a lot of it resorts to the fact that, again, the comment I made earlier of trying to target a wide cast of folks within the community. We believe the best way to achieve that is hit some of these lower income targets that we're mentioning, where we're looking at the 30% bracket specifically. There's not a lot of housing options for folks at 30% area median income within the community. The trade-off of targeting individuals at lower incomes is having to offset that with some higher incomes as well to create a balance versus seeing that of a market rate development where they're maybe all at 50%, for example, of kind of that middle tier. So what we're trying to do here is target deeper populations, but also then have higher populations to offset that.
Okay. Well, we're almost equal between the 30 and 50 and then the higher end. It's disappointing in a way that we don't have more in that, that are more targeted to the affordable, low income. As you said, that is the pinch point here, and it's a pinch point everywhere.
Yep.
I mean, housing is just what it is. And then I want to make sure everybody knows, I know everybody here knows, but in there that you're only going to be at 30% for property tax. Is that correct, Randy?
We are estimating that, let me go back to that, let me get the number right. I think it was 3.5 million is what we're estimating for valuation.
Okay.
And so, and Tyler, if I didn't say anything wrong, or Keith, jump in here. It's looked at because they're providing lower rents, that's taken into calculation as part of how their assessment works for the property. So it's different than a market property assessment.
It's lower.
Correct.
And
Yep.
that's every it's not just.
Yeah.
It's every.
Yeah. So all of that is, your taxes is all product of your NOI, your net operating income. Your net operating income on affordable housing development is going to be significantly lower than the market rate.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just wanted that out there. That's my only other concern, and it's my major concern, is the traffic. And I have made it, I have mentioned this before. This development has been, in my experience, in my district, one of the most ones that people disagree with, only for the traffic. I drove up from Ozanee today, and at 2:25, there was a line in the turn lane from Thomas, or Grand to go to Thomas, almost back block after block after block. And they're just stuck, and they go a little bit at a light and then stuck again. And that's right where your out person, right where that's supposed to go. That's concerning, and my concern is not that there's going to be more traffic, that's not an issue, but what is your concern about traffic conflict and crashes there? That's my concern, because I don't want to have any more crashes or anything serious happen, and I'm worried about that with putting another 50 units right in the nexus of where it's one of the most busiest intersections probably within the city.
Yeah, sure. No, again, the traffic concerns, we've heard them, and we understand where they're stemming from. To your point on accidents, that was the main driver in the right only, to avoid someone crossing lanes and then getting T-boned. But I will say, in addition to the traffic concerns, while I understand this site has been vacant for some time, prior to us working through this entitlement process, this land was zoned for commercial use. I think we could all agree that a lot of the permitted uses under the city of Wausau's commercial zoning, such as a coffee shop or a convenience store, would garner a significant more amount of traffic on this site than a residential housing development. And then on top of that, it's a regional housing development that is slated for affordable housing units that are at lower income amounts. Especially the 30 and the 50% amount of the area median income. A lot of these households have no car at all, and if they do, it's one. We certainly envision these tenants using the public transit. There's a plethora of bus stops in close proximity, in addition to a lot of amenities that are walkable. So I think through all of that, it suggests that a residential affordable housing development is arguably one of the best uses for this site if the city is going to redevelopment for those reasons.
And if I could just add on, one of the things that we talked about through this process of working through with staff is working through the process is reserving additional right-of-way on Grand Avenue. There's a project potentially going to happen in 2031, 2032 in that timeframe. They're not looking at any expansions necessarily in terms of roadway with that, but we want to reserve that right-of-way. So if there is an opportunity in the future for safety improvements, turn lanes, what have you, that there is land available that wouldn't conflict with the existing building that's being proposed on the site.
Alder Killian?
I'd like to say that our ED staff has spoken to me very highly about Commonwealth as a developer and that
Good.
they're excellent. The pains you've gone through to make it work for that site have been commendable. But as the Alder of District 3, I, like Alder McElhaney, have received more feedback in non-support of this development. And again, it's been because of traffic and safety issues. So I don't think that I'm going to be able to support this development agreement, but I did want to let you know about the positives I have heard about Commonwealth and
Good.
commend you on your efforts.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Alder Henke?
Yeah, thanks. Just to the point of 50 units on this lot, I guess I look at, if we don't put 50 units there, we still own this lot, and I guess what would be the plan for it then? Single-family homes? I wouldn't want to put single-family homes on that intersection. Commercial? They're going to put a quick trip there? That's going to be twice as much traffic as a affordable apartments, or as an apartment complex. So really, I think this is a very challenging site, and I think we have a really good opportunity to develop it and not just leave it sit there and do nothing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think to Alder Henke's point, I'm in District 2, and so my district's adjacent to this property, and I know the residents in our neighborhood group have expressed their concerns about the traffic. I think but I also believe that the planning and the traffic study that's been done so far has, looking at the diagrams here, and the thought of the right in, right out to minimize conflict is probably one of the best solutions for this challenging site in order to get vehicles in and out of the unit. You think about the quick trip down the street on Grand Avenue, and that is a nightmare. The people trying to take lefties in and out all the time, and I don't know why we allow that, but that's what it is. And the fortunate thing, I think, with this traffic plan, we're not gonna see that to any substantive effect on Grand or Thomas Street, considering that there's a median on Grand Avenue, and while there's no median on the Thomas Street side, I think it would be challenging to try to take a left turn there also. Excuse me. Yeah, my only concern would be, if people do want to try to try to loop back to try to get around to going north into downtown or out west on the Thomas Street, how they would navigate that. But I think time will probably come up with traffic patterns where the residents will be able to figure out how they can best manage, to go in those certain directions. But this plan is definitely commendable, and I think, considering the location, I think the traffic plan is the best that we're going to get for this. So, Alder Gisselman.
Just a couple things. That medium is important on Grand Avenue, and I would hope that people are not envisioning a way that goes away. I think that that is a key part of that safety of Grand Avenue. So I trust engineering. And also with regard to the engineering of that intersection, with people living in this complex, Hammond Park across the street becomes more important. And I think we have to be diligent in working the lights at that intersection so that there is some safe space coming from the east side of Grand Avenue, from the south side of Thomas Street to go into Hammond Park. That's our closest park. It's a neighborhood park. We have a great park there, and I would hope that with the development of this complex, that the tenants there would have a safe route, a very safe route to make it across the street to Hammond Park. Thank you.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. Hammond Park is a jewel, and I think it would be something that would a focal point for the people living in those units, and also considering the residents of Riverview Towers. It would it would just be a good meeting ground between the two, and I envision great really nice things could be happening in that park there. Alder McElhaney.
I just have a question for Randy. You said that you left room for the right-of-way, and you talked about 2031. We talked about that in this committee before, but we gave up the right-of-way, so so I would like that explained a little bit. I mean, if we have land available, did we have to give up that $400 and some $1,000 for the right-of-way? If there's land available and they're planning to do it in 2031?
So it'll kind of be a long answer, but hopefully I hit everything you're talking about. So when the city purchased these parcels from 2005 to about 2009, the majority of them were purchased for the future real estate needs of that intersection. When that happened, some of them were allocated fully as right-of-way at that point. So we've been going through the process through infrastructure of vacating some of that right-of-way. That was actually, I think, all 4 of those residential parcels that you see on that site. As part of that, if you go to page 70 of your packet, I think that's probably the best way of showing it and explaining it. But what we wanted to do along Grand Avenue was, although we're vacating some of those parcels as right-of-way, we're actually restricting what is able to be built on. So although you look at the site plan and where they have the property boundaries on there, it's going to look like it's really tight to the road. That's actually a 20-foot wide strip along Grand Avenue that's currently not developed or have any roads on it. That if there is a need for a future road expansion, whether that's adding another lane, that land is reserved for potential roadway. Did I help you or hurt you?
I mean, that's fine, and that's what I understand, but is that enough roadway to keep the DOT in that money in play?
Right, so Randy was right on. Along Grand Avenue from the very beginning with this project, we reserved an extra 20 feet along that whole side of this parcel, with the idea that if there's any change in the configuration of the lanes of Grand Avenue, or if they just need a few extra feet, that it was available. So we were trying to kind of look ahead with that. I believe our engineering staff did have WISDOT take a look at the intersection of Grand and Thomas, and specifically that right turn lane, to see what additional room might be needed in a future reconstruct. They have to run certain turning movements in order to get certain size vehicles through, and they know how much room they need. And the conclusion from that was that there was going to be enough room remaining to be able to handle a right turn lane there that they needed. Now the other part of the right-of-way that we would need to vacate as well, that's a separate item related to the other. So it's not connected to the right-of-way reserved along Grand Avenue. That's It's a separate item related to the acquisition of those parcels back in 2005, 2008.
I think I can answer your question, and Eric, and if you have anything to correct me on, please do so. But the DOT reimbursement is really an all or nothing thing. Because we are utilizing and vacating some of that right away, it takes away our option to seek reimbursement in the future on that.
My next question is, will the city have to put in money to redo any of those lanes coming up?
I'd look to our Public Works Director if he has any insight.
Yeah, this is a state highway, so there will be, the DOT will be funding the full construction of the project, but we will have some city contribution in there as far as engineering, inspection. Obviously, we'll have to pay for all the water and sewer on that project, but the actual street reconstruction and the storm sewer will be by the DOT.
That's kind of normal
Yeah,
stuff that we
for-
do now. I mean, it's nothing
Correct.
extra. We're not losing anything besides that or that vacation money that the DOT had.
That's correct, yeah, yeah.
And wouldn't we gain because Thomas Street is now part of Business 51? So,
It is,
yeah,
yes.
previously, before that rerouting, we would have had to pay for Thomas Street reconstruction.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, the intersection, the DOT would have still done, just
Okay.
because of, it was on Grand Avenue, yeah.
Anything else? Well, Alder Lukens, you're the chair, you could go.
I just wanted to, in follow-up to Alder Henke earlier and Alder Martins, regarding this, I also have heard concerns, all along about this parcel and the traffic. I will say that I myself was in an accident by the Quick Trip with someone turning left onto Grand Ave, so hit me a couple of years ago, but thankfully, it's, he was pulling out of there and just assumed, anyway, but for this parcel, I guess, because of the need for housing and, working in the schools and Community Partners Campus being just down the street. I know people who use Community Partners Campus, who rely on the resources there. I know, students who are, whose families are living with others because they, we have this need for housing, they don't have the income for the housing that we have. And so for a number of those reasons, I will be voting for this. I understand there are concerns, but at the same time, as Alder Hinkie said, we need housing, and this has been commercial property. So I too think at least some of the people that I'm thinking of in my mind, they don't have cars, and it's on the bus line. So, firsthand, I know I was just at the Wausau School District Summit, there's a need for housing for our students and their families for this community. So anyway, for those reasons, I will be voting in favor of this. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else from the Finance Committee? Alder Gisselman.
With regard to the design, considering the nature of the tenants, will a school bus be able to pull into your parking lot? And because I would hate to have I would question a school bus on Grand Avenue or Thomas Street.
I can't speak for a school
Okay.
district, but I would say no.
Okay, thank you.
I can say something to that. They would be on the city bus. They would be taking the city bus.
A school bus?
In that area,
They would be taking
a city bus.
Unless it's like Head Start or something, I would imagine.
Yeah. I don't know for little ones. Yeah, I'm not sure.
So that's a city bus.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure for little ones. I'm not sure. So,
One of the things that we've discussed as part of the project is that there is a bus stop currently over by Riverview Towers. May be necessary to add one or further down there depending on what the need is. It's something that we won't be able to determine really until we get a better idea of the development and flow of everything.
Okay. Anything else? Otherwise, on the finance side, I'll entertain a motion from the finance committee.
I'll move to approve the development agreement.
Okay, a motion from Hinkie, second. Okay, second from Gisselman. All right, and then economic development, do you want to get your
get the
motion?
motion first?
Yeah, and then we can discuss and vote.
so for economic development, I will entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the development agreement with 700 Grand Avenue.
Okay, thank you.
Apartments.
And looking for a second. Okay, so motion by Alder Henke and a second by Alder Gisselman.
Okay. Any further discussion? Not hearing anything from the finance committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Is it, okay. Finance, was that a, Michael, were you aye? Okay. So the motion carries.
Okay, so Economic Development Committee, then or any other comments, questions? ED? Okay, so then all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And you're on ED. Oh, okay. And any opposed? Okay. So one opposed, so Alder Gisselman, were you in favor? He was in favor, okay, I didn't hear it. Okay, so one opposed.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. With no other business, I'll entertain a motion from the finance committee to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Motion from
Finance.
Hinkie, second, Gisselman. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We, finance committee is adjourned.
And then I will entertain a motion for the Economic Development Committee.
I'll make a motion to adjourn economic development.
Okay, so motion to adjourn by Alder Henke, second by Alder Killian. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion, meeting adjourned. Thank you.